welcome to another episode of Morgan's Pop Talks, breaking down the latest in reality TV and pop culture. On location today, I am on vacation with my family and my nieces are going to get here any second. So I feel like I have to hurry up and get this podcast out there before, all hell breaks loose in this house because they're going to want their scooters. They're going to want to go to the pool. They're going to want all the things. So I'm like trying to get there. My mind is scrambled, to be completely honest with you. I don't even know where to begin. But because I'm on vacation today, I am only going to be talking about the Summer House reunion, which it's also like, what else is going on? There's literally nothing else going on besides the Summer House reunion. Wow. Let me just start with the shenanigans that was going on before the Summer House reunion. Amanda and West fleeing to Rome. They should have been put on the no-fly list as this reunion dropped, because after watching it, I understand why they needed to flee the country. Just overall opinions, and I'm going to really dissect the episode, but overall, I was just absolutely shocked about the way Amanda Petula showed up to this reunion. And I feel like very quickly the flip was switched. She came in ready to give her apology and hold accountability and have accountability and whatever. And then the second Ciara came back at her and was like, oh, now you can at least say our names. And the way that she scoffed, I was like, that was brat behavior number one. When she's like, did you think that Ciara was just going to sit there and not say anything the entire time? But the domino started to fall after that, where I was like, wow, Amanda, I was just very surprised that was Amanda's MO showing up to the reunion. Not only that, West and his podcast antics. First of all, I'm not listening to Sophie Cunningham and Wes Wilson's podcast. It's supposed to be about the WNBA, I think, or just sports in general. But he's using it to talk about the reunion and stuff that's going on within the cast dynamics, and something I really did not like. And they posted it as a clip, as Sophie was saying, oh, when I saw the Summer House teaser drop and Ciara said, you're with Amanda despite me, Sophie's like, well, I know the truth and that's not true, blah, 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 blah. And Wes is like, yeah, I just didn't feel like combating it because it's like, what can you say? You just got to let it roll off your shoulders. And it's like, if you're not going to say that to Ciara Miller's face at the reunion, I don't need to hear it on your dusty podcast. Okay? And my mom's in the other room and I know she's listening to me. So I'm trying to be nice because my mom's going to poke her head in the corner and be like, Morgan, you need to be nice. But it's just, I was like, it's such a beta move, in the words of Ciara Miller, such a beta move. But we start the reunion with Kyle and Lindsay in green screens in the city. And it just felt like, the universe was really looking out for us Bravo fans in that moment, because it was captured on tape. Lindsay's reaction, Kyle's reaction, the whole cast was calling each other. Who was it? Mia was calling Lindsay, Jesse was calling Lindsay, Carl was calling Kyle. And two things stood out to me in the first 3 minutes of the episode. One, I want to know what Lindsay meant when she said, that's not at all what happened. She's going through the statement, reading it line by line. And, it says it's still very new. We made it especially important to approach this with care because of our castmates. And Lindsay says, that's not at all what happened. So I would love to know more about that. And also the second thing that really stood out to me was Carl clocking West's touchiness and being inappropriate with Amanda. Carl says, you don't touch married women like that. And, I agree. I've been saying it on the recaps multiple times throughout this season that West is a very flirty by nature guy. There are those touchy-feely people and the giggles and whatever, but, it's just inappropriate when it's Amanda and she's married to Kyle and this is Kyle's show and this is Kyle's summer house, right? It's just disrespectful. I will say Wes he wasn't only touchy-feely with Amanda. I mean, he was touchy-feely with Ciara and we saw where it led. He was touchy-feely with Mia. I mean, you go back and watch that final scene where they're all saying goodbye and West is like hugging and kissing and whatever. So yeah, just not okay in any regard. But one thing that's driven me nuts this week with the Summer House fandom is all the online chatter about, it's not about the timeline. it's a little bit about the timeline. Now, that's not the only thing that matters here, but to say, we don't care about the timeline, you guys. We have to be serious. Every episode of Summer House season 10 that has come out where there's been a moment between Amanda and West here and a moment that, like, we have been dissecting it. So to say that we don't care about the timeline is not true. And the cast cares about the timeline. I mean, Kyle says, I don't know when this all happened, but there has been blinds going back to June of 2025. And, Lindsay is saying, I want to know when this happened. And Mia said that date, January 17th was the first time that I noticed something was off. So it's like, yes, it's part of the scandal. It's not the entire scandal. Obviously, there's so many more relationship dynamics when you consider the way Amanda's actions have impacted Ciara and Kyle and how Wes' actions have impacted them. But like, to say that nobody cares about the timeline is a lie. We got to stop saying that. The dressing room talk. I mean, first of all, to see Amanda and Wes names right above each other. Even when that came out in the trailer, I was like, oh gosh, yeah, that's jarring. And Carl summed it up perfectly. He was like, that's going to be an adjustment for me. And we're like, yeah, Carl, you're speaking for the rest of us too. And KJ says he was supposed to go to that Yankees game with West. I want to know, was KJ supposed to go to that Yankees game with West and Amanda, or did Amanda take KJ's spot? Or I don't know. I think that's probably more probable because then KJ says, Wes and I are no longer friends. So maybe they had plans to go to that game together. Then all of this stuff came out. They're no longer friends. So Wes decided to take Amanda. But, when they're in their dressing room, seeing Ciara talk to Andy really broke my heart. There's tears welling up in her eyes, and she's talking about how shocked and hurt she is by both West and Amanda, more so by Amanda just because of how shocking it is. And, the only question she has is why. And there's tears in her eyes, and you can just feel her heartbreak. And, the stark contrast to Amanda and West's dressing room where they're laying on each other, which like, ugh. But, Annie goes to see Amanda and West, and they say, the truth is already out there. There's nothing new, but we're ready to get this rolling. It's just like, it's weird. It's odd energy. Can't say that I'm here for it. Before they go out to the reunion stage, Ciara, Mia, and Kyle are all together. And I love hearing their perspectives on watching back the Summer House episodes. Kyle says the last two Summer House episodes were the toughest reunion prep. And Ciara is talking about watching the latest Summer House episode, the finale. And it just feels like the cast is having a similar experience to us watching the show. Normally they have been there, done that, know everything that's about to happen. There's obviously context that gets added when they're able to watch confessionals and stuff, but it seems like Kyle Cook is watching season 10 of Summer House the same way that we're watching season 10 of Summer House, analyzing every frame, wondering, what did that mean? Well, what does this mean? Well, why did they do that? So it's just crazy when you think about it. And Ciara apologizes to Kyle in that moment. She starts to cry and says, I feel like I really misunderstood you this summer. And they hug it out. And that's how you apologize. That is how you take accountability. You're not like combative. Well, this is why I felt this way and blah, 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 blah. No. She says, I'm sorry. I feel like I misunderstood you. And Kyle's like, yeah, I felt certainly misunderstood by everybody in the house. And again, Kyle, Andy touches on it when he's talking to Kyle. He's like, Kyle, you're the luckiest guy ever because you were supposed to be in the hot seat for this reunion. And now you're no longer the biggest problem in the room. It's like, yeah, it's just so crazy to think of how different the audience would have reacted to this season had the situation with Amanda and Wes not really blown everything up. Amanda was very ready for her opening statement. She says, I'm here to take accountability, own up to what I've done, apologize to Ciara and Kyle. And Ciara says, oh, I'm glad you could say our names this time. And that's when I knew Ciara was ready. She was ready. And she was not backing down, which I loved it. I felt like, and we'll get into it more as the episode progresses, but everything Ciara said was delivered so precisely on the money in a way that was just, like masterful to see. Like I felt like every single word that came out of Ciara's mouth was truthful and accurate, still, really delivering the sense of betrayal that she felt while also reading them to filth. And when Ciara says, oh, at least she could say our names this time, and Amanda's like, what? She repeats it, and then Amanda goes, brat behavior. I was like, oh gosh, here we go. Do you see how quickly the mask fell from her taking accountability to do you not think that Ciara is going to have something to say back to you after all of this? And that moment was really the like transition moment in Amanda's demeanor, and it didn't last but 5 seconds. It was crazy. We do get into the timeline of it all. Ciara says the first time that she suspected something was going on between Amanda and West was January 17th. I just want to remind you that the separation post coming from Amanda and Kyle was January 15th. So a whole 2 days later is when all of this happened. Ciara says, I went to call Amanda to invite her out to drinks with her and Mia, and her location was at West's. Amanda didn't answer until Mia put the 3 of them in a group chat, and Ciara says, yeah, that was for us to see if you would respond to us. And, she says, I responded within 30 minutes. Like, well, you didn't call me back because obviously you were hiding something. You were at West. And Amanda's response is, well, West was there for me all summer. And we're all just like, girl. Like, Ciara said it best. Where was I? Where was I? It's like, hello, Ciara was there for you the entire summer. Ciara says, girl, I've called you, I've texted you, I've invited you to my house, and you act like your phone doesn't work. And they're insinuating here because Mia says you prioritized your relationship with Wes. It's like, that she was responding to Wes text messages. You're breadcrumbing everybody on Instagram. I need more on that. I need Andy to touch more on the breadcrumbing Instagram, going back all the way to June of 2025 when Wes posts a picture of Kyle and the caption says, my ex's best friend, which is crazy. And I know there has been also some online chatter about, there's this one picture that Amanda posted and the caption of it says, I broke my wedding vows. And people were like, what does that mean? Now, I don't know what it means, but what I will say is there was this, inside joke between Amanda and Kyle during their wedding, and she said it in their wedding vows that she would always wear mascara. I don't know if Kyle didn't like it whenever Amanda didn't wear mascara or not, but in the photo she wasn't wearing mascara. She was like in full glam, didn't have any mascara on. So that's how I took that. That's like a deep cut throwback, so I understand if your mind would have gone somewhere else there, but I'm just saying it's a possibility that that's what she could have been talking about, or she could have been talking about something else. I don't know. But Amanda's like, I was hanging out with other people. And the rest of the cast is like, no, honey, you don't have any other friends. You have one friend in Katie DeLuca. And a lot of friends that they've seen her hang out with have been friends of West. And Amanda's getting really riled up in this moment. She says, I don't post every time I go out. But she posts the most, when she is going out with West. And the moment that Amanda hurled that exploitative at Ciara, it's like, oh no, honey, it's not a good look from you. Mandy, brat behavior number 2. It's like, okay, so Kyle's not allowed to say that to you because, he's your husband, which we've said it a million times, he shouldn't. But you can turn around and say it to Ciara after you deeply betrayed her. It's like, again, the victim mentality is crazy. Rules for thee, but not for me. And then the eye roll that Amanda Batula gave Ciara Miller, I could not believe it. And like I said, 1 second you're going from, I want to take accountability and I want to apologize to Ciara and Kyle, and then you're eye rolling her, you're cussing at her. It's just not giving the energy that is needed to smooth things over, not only with the people in the room, that's who is most important, but also the audience. It's like, this reunion showing from Amanda and the energy that she brought to it did not do her any favors in the court of public opinion. They reveal that Jesse did not know about Amanda and Wes, says they lied about it until the bitter end. And in the extended version, there is a moment where Jesse says, I have a timeline, and he pulls out cards. And we're like, yeah, Carl's like, yeah, show it. That's why we're here. We want the timeline. So Jesse seemingly had receipts as well. They didn't dive into it on the extended part of the reunion, but that's where they left it. My dad just pulled in the driveway, so I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of commotion here in a second, but... And the smoke was not just for Amanda. Ciara really came at West saying, you're the most fraudulent person on the stage. We've been here for 3 years and nobody knows who you actually are. You live a different life off camera as you do on camera, which Ciara knows West probably a lot more than we do, but it also took me back to when Paige said to West, we live our lives and then there's a camera. We don't do things because there's a camera. So I kind of feel like this has been brewing amongst some of them in regards to West for quite some time. But then there's the revelation that West had a girlfriend, although he says we weren't, official, but that's a tale as old as time. I feel like that's kind of West's MO. He has these women that he gets to fall for him, but he always, has it under the guise of, oh, well, we're not official. We're just friends. He was just friends with Ciara. He's just friends with Mija. Do we really know specifically if Amanda and Wes are label boyfriend, girlfriend? No, we don't know. I feel like that's his get out of jail free card where he can just act any way that he wants with these women and lead them on and, kiss them and send them flirty text messages. But he always reverts back to, well, I told them that I didn't want to be in a serious relationship, so they have no reason to be upset with me. And that's just not reality. And, Mija was the horsehair tie girl whenever West was on Watch What Happens Live and he wore that tie. And Amanda says, yeah, I knew that Mija spent the night before that Watch What Happens Live appearance, which again is like, Amanda must just be okay with being one of many, which is why Mia says to her, Amanda, why are you doing this? You went from being married. Now we know that your marriage wasn't all rainbows and butterflies, but you went from being married to being one of West's side chicks. And it just doesn't make any sense. And, Amanda's like, I got out of this long relationship. I had this awakening or whatever. There was so much hype and public praise around Amanda getting out of this toxic relationship. And, her Marie Claire interview where she's talking about she wants to be, hot and have a boyfriend and, and do whatever she wants to do, have a younger boyfriend. And it just kind of feels like she got swept up in all of that and really disregarded her friendship with Ciara in the process. One of the most intriguing parts of the Summer House reunion to me was when Ciara read the text messages exchanged between her and Amanda. Amanda says, the internet is on one right now, and I feel like everything I do is under a microscope, and I can't believe that I'm even having to text you. She says, Wes and I are very much so just friends. And then she says, well, everything in that moment was PG. You guys, I don't know about that. And the cast too is like, are we really gonna die on that hill? Jesse says, just stop lying, you guys. Get it together. Like, why can't you guys just tell us? And they read more of the text messages. So Amanda says, well, duh, but Wes and I are not. I'm sad we're even having to discuss this. Ciara says, so can I expect for there to be no photo or videos coming out? Feels like such a widespread rumor for there to be no veracity to it. She says, nothing different than what I've posted myself. Which obviously, that's not true. And I'm also just confused because Ciara says here, so I can expect for there to be no photo or videos coming out, which I thought that's why they released the statement, was because the word on the street was that there was this video that was going around of Amanda and Wes in a compromising position. So they felt like they obviously needed to come clean and tell the truth before the video got out there. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was, what was being said online. So then they're talking about how Amanda all of a sudden turned off her location. Amanda's like, I don't want everybody knowing where I am. Well, duh. Like, no, when you're hanging out at your boyfriend's ex's house doing whatever, it's like, duh. And the first kiss they said was at the end of February after the brunch where Wes went out with the boys and then went out with Amanda. He didn't tell the boys and then the boys saw them together. But this doesn't make any sense because according to Wes' good friends, Brianna Chicken Fry, you know, the talk of the town at the Super Bowl was that Wes and Amanda were together. Now, that was February 8th. This brunch was seemingly at the end of February. Like, do you think word on the street is getting back to Dave Portnoy if they're just holding hands underneath the table and everything is PG? Like, I don't think so. And then they say, when were you first together? And Amanda says, after the statement, which again just doesn't feel like the best idea. It's all going up in flames, so much so that you have to release this statement. You haven't gone there yet, allegedly. Like, how do you see everything that's going on and see the reaction and see the turmoil and decide, let's take it a step further? Like, that makes no sense to me. And that's why I just don't, I hate to say it, but I just don't believe that timeline. I think especially when you consider the Super Bowl of it all, there's just no way that it would be getting around like that if the timeline is what they said it was. Amanda texts Ciara again a couple days later. I believe it was March 7th. She had a guilty conscience about lying to Ciara. And in the second round of texts, she's saying, like, you know, I'm just in a bad headspace. I would really like to talk to you about this. This is when Amanda gets really defensive. She says, I'm not allowed to pursue something that I feel really strongly about. And it's like, well, you're also saying two different stories here. Do you feel strongly about it, or do you not know what's happening and you don't know what's going on and you're just trying to make it out alive? So that's kind of why it's just none of the pieces of the puzzle are fitting together in a way. It's like, if you guys were together since January 17th, like, we could believe that you maybe had developed these stronger feelings. But if it's just been a couple of weeks, it's like Amanda is trying to downplay it. And that's what Ciara says here. You came in here today with the intention of trying to downplay this. And Ciara says, you know, this has disrupted the entire house. It's potentially ruined their livelihood because the current iteration of Summer House cannot come back and film together. There's just no way. And I know I've seen that West and Kyle had this sit down conversation for 3 hours, and West doesn't know if it was filmed for In the City or Summer House. I have conflicting feelings about it. I do think that Kyle is being a little bit too lenient at this point. You know, at first I understood. I'm a very forgiving person as well, and I'm also a very naive person. So like, anything anybody says to me, I just believe it at face value. So I could see how Kyle would want to make amends and move forward. You know, he did say on his Watch What Happens Live appearance that he doesn't want to keep anybody from their job, West, and filming. But at this point, I'm like, I understand the loyalty to Amanda more than I do to West. You know, Amanda and Kyle were together for 10 years. And even though it was not the best relationship in the world, there is a decade of history there that you can't ignore. But like, West, I don't know if I'd be sitting down for a 3-hour chat with West, unless Kyle knows that it's going to make good TV. And if it's for In the City, you know, the ratings are going to go up if that scene is on that show. Ciara, with another zinger, says, we might as well discuss the details before I put them in the ground and cover them with dirt. Just add it to the list of like knife, heart, twist, just cutting statements from Ciara Miller. But we move on and we do get to talk about some other things. This was like the first 30 minutes. You know, Mia talks about breaking up with Scott, which we kind of saw the writing on the wall with that one, right? It really reminded me of Danielle's relationship with Robert in previous seasons of Summer House, where, you know, he's this private chef and he's going around all these places and he just doesn't really know. You know, there's no way for him to commit to that type of relationship and be what Mia needs in that moment. When asked if Mia instigated the breakup, she said, I always do, period. Love that. And then one of my favorite lines from the Summer House reunion came from Mia, where she says, I think it's unhealthy to go from one serious relationship to another. Now, she's talking about her breakup with Scott, but the camera goes to Amanda and Wes. But like, it is true. And especially for Amanda to get out of this 10-year relationship and just the trajectory that she was on and getting the Ariana Madix treatment and having all of these brands want to work with her. It's like, we would just be in such a different place if she would have continued down that path. But to throw it all away for West Wilson is like one of the craziest things that's happened on reality TV in a long time, in my opinion. we get this feisty moment between Bailey and Ben. Ben says, we didn't know each other enough for Bailey to say something like that in front of the entire table, talking about Amanda at the birthday dinner. There's so much to unpack with this scene alone. First of all, Bailey is like, what? We weren't? We had multiple conversations, like the newbies were in real tight with each other the first couple of weeks. So to say that we didn't have any conversation before that is crazy. And then Ben also says, like, it was an outlandish comment to make. At that time, yes. But was it outlandish? I mean, we see later in the season, Amanda kind of copped to it. Like, there's this group text talking about how Ben was interested in Amanda in Italy, even though Amanda was married. So, like, the deflection here is not it. And then Ben's like, well, they're like, Ben, do you have anger problems? And it's like, well, yeah. Pretty much. And I remember watching the moment that Ben went off on Bailey and just thinking that it went too far. Like, it didn't need to go to the extent that it did. Bailey pretty much apologized pretty quickly after Ben expressed how he felt about it, but he just kept going and going and going. And it's like, okay, we get it. Why are you coming in so hot? People make mistakes. It was like a one sentence offhanded comment. Yes, in an unfortunate setting, but can't take it back now. What else can she do besides apologize? But it seems like he just would not let it go. And then Bailey says, yeah, I think you like to reprimand women. You did it to me. You did it to Amanda. I've seen you do it to Sabrina. And then they also say, we also think you were dating Sabrina the entire time, which, like, is that the overall consensus from the audience as well? I think so. I think that's why he got so upset about Bailey saying it. And it's like, I guess everybody has a secret girlfriend on this show. Who knows? Bailey says it was attractive when his anger was heightened as opposed to Ben. And she says, yeah, Ben, because Carl was standing up on behalf of a woman. You were coming at a woman. It would have been totally different if Carl had that position against like Bailey or somebody like that. But no, he was standing up to Kyle. That's the big difference here. Yeah, I want Carl and Bailey to be together. I guess I can kind of understand why they're not. Carl has a lot going on right now with, Soft Bar. He wrote his book. He's been doing a lot of things. He's very like business oriented at the moment. But I'm like hoping one day that they'll just give it a go. In the extended version, Lindsay kind of gives her stamp of approval where she's like, you guys are both like quirky and a little awkward. And I just think that it would work. And, Lindsay says, Bailey would go for it if you would go for it, Carl. So like, what's the deal? And Carl's like, I just don't feel like it's the right time. We also get this very emotional moment from KJ. KJ reveals in the fall he went to the hospital for self-harm. He was there for a week. Mia and Ciara were there almost every day. He then went to recovery for a few months. He said he needed to face his issues head on. He says he's better now and that he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He says he's grateful that he's here alive and thankful for the support of his friends. This moment did me in. I don't know about you, but obviously we don't know KJ all that well yet. One season in, a newbie. It's not like he's getting, 30 minutes of screen time every episode, but everything that I've seen from KJ is that he just does wear his heart on his sleeve. He's a very vulnerable and authentic person. The good and the bad, highs and lows, whether he is happy and excited or anxious and struggling, he really shares it all. And I feel like that also is reflective of how deeply he's feeling this friendship betrayal with Amanda and West. He talked about how important the boys were to him this summer and that he's never had a group of guys like that be so close to him. And he's calling them family. And so for this situation to derail all of that when it seems like it was finally something that KJ was able to obtain for himself has really been, heartbreaking for him. Yeah, that moment made me really sad, but also just like a God wink for Ciara and Mia to enter KJ's life at this time. It kind of seems like God knew that KJ would need Mia and Ciara. And I love their friendship. I think we all do. So they talk about the final night in the house, the ear stuff. I don't want to talk about that. But Amanda says, I didn't know that they were canoodling to that extent. And Kyle says, were you like breadcrumbing the audience? You know what to say to win people over. And Ciara says, yeah, was I used for a storyline? And Wes says, at no point did I ever say we were going to date again. And it's like, yes, because he's very meticulous in the things that he says. And the things that he says doesn't always match up with the things that he does. It's like he wants to have these super flirty friendships with people like Ciara, who, is not that type of person. And he knows that. So, like I said, I feel like he almost uses that as a get out of jail free card where he's like, well, I said this, so it shouldn't be any surprise that this is the way that it panned out. It's like, well, your actions said otherwise. And he didn't say that to Ciara. He said it to Ben. So, like, I'm really wondering when they had that conversation now. He says they had it after filming Wrapped in the fall. They went to dinner and he said, look, I don't want to jump back in. But Ciara says there were still flirty texts. He says they were less often. There was one sleepover. No, there was two. And then Lindsay says, like, what's stronger, an emotional connection or a physical connection? And he says emotional, and no follow-ups. I'm like, got him. No follow-ups there. The last 3 minutes of the Summer House reunion were incredible between what Lindsay said, what Ciara said. I was just like, what just happened? Lindsay's like, I'm catching myself. You're very good, Wes. You're very good at disarming people, making them feel comfortable. You're good at pulling girls, doing what you need to do to climb the ladder. And I actually did see Lindsay responded to this comment about that. Okay, so this is from Anna LaPeach on Threads. It says, Wes noticed a few weekends into the summer that Amanda was looking like the victim of a horrible marriage. He realizes she may come out of this season with the fame and opportunity akin to Ariana Madix. He then decides to lean into looking like a supportive friend and hero for Amanda so he can weasel his way into capitalizing on her after-season success. New network of opportunities unlocked. You cannot convince me otherwise. And then Lindsay says, and bingo was his name-o. So when Lindsay's saying you do this to climb the ladder, you're a clout chaser, that's what she's talking about. And he says, she says, as soon as this situation with Amanda no longer suits you, you're going to move on to the next, just like you did with Ciara. And time will tell, but my gut says she's not wrong. And then Ciara, wow. This moment from Ciara had me speechless. She said, maybe they'll be together because the best woman for West is someone who's not going to check him on anything. And that's totally Amanda. She's very mute. She's going to be that weak figure that he needs, and he can always be the star in the relationship. Yeah, that one hurts. Kyle says, that was harsh. Ciara says, that's your wife. She's not my wife. Kid gloves are off. The last episode of Summer House, Amanda was telling Ciara, don't treat me like a little kid anymore. I need to hear it. And she heard it. Was it harsh? Yes. Was it also true? I think it was true. Kyle kind of caught stray because, Ciara is insinuating that Amanda has been in this type of relationship before where the male counterpart is the star and they don't ever get their actions checked. So he's like, sitting there crying, melting into the couch. But also that's not Ciara. Ciara is not that person. And this reunion part 1 is just one of many examples of how she's never going to be that person to just sweep things under the rug for your comfort. So yeah, I guess my biggest takeaways from part 1, Ciara came ready and with facts and receipts. Amanda and her attitude was just giving like childish behavior to me. West, you can tell, is obviously scared, still struggles with saying exactly how he feels and really owning up to things. There's a lot of word salads going on. The timeline still, I don't think we're ever going to get concrete proof of the correct timeline, the exact timeline, the truthful timeline. Can you believe that was only part 1? I truly cannot believe it. All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm sweating. I'm sweating a la Wes Wilson. Okay, I need to get out of here and turn a fan on or something. Go lay by the pool, actually. Don't forget, if you want more, to subscribe to the Patreon. We have a bonus episode every single week that'll come out on Monday. Patreon.com/MorgansPopTalks. Leave a review, a little 5-star boop boop, a little love you like a sis. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe so you never miss out on any episode of MPT. I'll see you next week, and as always, love you like a sis.